And welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Tom Fornelli. That's Bud Elliott. I'm Chip Patterson, coming to you live at youtube.com/cover3 and all across the 24/7 Sports Facebook network. Thanks for hanging out. Smash that subscribe, smash that like, come and join us in the chat. You see those sirens in your feed. You know exactly what that means. It's an emergency podcast of the coaching variety. And this time we are here discussing what is currently reported so daggum widely, I have to assume is basically on its way to being official. Luke Fickell being named the next head coach at Wisconsin. A lot to get to here because Luke Fickell, of course, with the work that he did during his time at Cincinnati, leading them to 4 top 25 finishes, 2 top 10 finishes, 2 conference championships. He was named the AAC Coach of the Year twice, a 57-18 record. He churned out daggum 9 NFL draft picks last year. His talent evaluation, his player development, it made him a very hot commodity. He reportedly interviewed for the Michigan State job after Mark D'Antonio retired abruptly in February of 2020, but decided to stay at Cincinnati. The Notre Dame job came open. The Oklahoma job came open, but he never really got, I don't remember. I mean, we can, relitigate this. Y'all can hold my feet to the fire on it, but I don't ever remember they're getting a bunch of steam on either of those outside of, our assumption that those would be places where he is interested. So Wisconsin then has been a job that he will reportedly make the move for. First, Wisconsin got Luke Fickell. Is this the deal breaker for how good a job Wisconsin is? Because if you got Luke Fickell to up and leave what we thought was going to be a place where he was very comfortable to stay for a while, I've got to think that this is a good reflection on the Badgers' job, and especially the Badgers' job in the future college football landscape.
Yeah, it's interesting because, as you mentioned, Luke Fickell been mentioned for so many jobs as a top candidate, and we even kind of brought it up a couple of weeks ago. It's kind of strangely quiet about Luke Fickell during this coaching carousel this year, and now, of course, this is when it finally happens. But I thought Ohio State was the job. Obviously, that he was ever going to leave Cincinnati, Ohio State would be the job. I thought Michigan could be the job. I thought Michigan State at the time could be the job, and I think it almost was. But there was other stuff going on in that athletic department that kind of caused him to pass on it. I felt like Penn State was the kind of job he would leave for. I didn't know if Wisconsin would be the place, but I mean, it makes sense. It's just now it's weird because we're going to have a new Big Ten, and it's like, what is Wisconsin's role going to be? Where is its place in this new Big Ten with USC coming in, with UCLA coming in, with the West Division likely going away? Mm-hmm. Like, Wisconsin needed to find a coach who can prove that he can keep them where they are and where they want to be. And I think getting Fickell from Cincinnati, that's probably, I mean, what other names are out there that Wisconsin could have gotten that you would consider to be a better hire than Luke Fickell?
I mean, the other names we heard associated with this at some time or another were the Kansas coach, Lance Leipold. Dave Doran from NC State. But I feel like Fickell is, I think, more accomplished in some ways than those guys. He took Cincinnati to the playoff. They've dominated the American Conference for a while. And I think this is a really nice hire. And it does make me question, to Chip's point, just how high they can go, right? Because you've heard about Michigan State taking one of the recruiting coordinators and sort of the dealings and the back office stuff that maybe Wisconsin is not fully built out and fully weaponized back then. Like I want to see, what does Wisconsin look like if they do go ahead and spend a lot of money on staffing, which at this point, if you're a Big Ten school, there's really no excuse
what are you spending that money on?
Right. Exactly. So, I mean, there is a battle in this league for who can be the number 4 team, right? In my mind, it's a very clear program-wise. This year, Michigan's the number 1 team. Program-wise, I think it's still Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State in that order, but Michigan can quickly change that if they keep winning. There's a battle for number 4. Will it be Nebraska if they get right because they're clearly willing to spend the money? Will it be Wisconsin? Will it be Michigan State? Like, those 3 teams in my mind are the 3 truly battling for that number 4 spot in the Big Ten because of their willingness to spend. And I think you have to elevate Wisconsin into that conversation now because looks like they're going to pay him $8-9 million. I think I saw on Twitter. So that's big time money.
Then you got USC coming.
Well, okay, that's fair. So the battle for number 5.
Yeah.
Well, That's why they had to. I mean, I like the way that you put it, Tom. I was working on the story for CBSSports.com. That was one of my big things. Wisconsin had to nail this. And if they wanted to look at Jim Leonhard, hey, Jim, I love you. I like Chris McIntosh also is a former Wisconsin player. Like the whole keep it in the family thing, I get it. But this is a big business decision. This is a business decision by Chris McIntosh to say, while this is great and we love our tradition and we love our family and our cheese and our beer and our House of Pain song from the 1990s that has somehow become a football tradition as well. Look, we don't have a lot of conference championships since 1970. There's only 6 of them. Barry Alvarez won 3 in the 90s. Brett Bielema won 3 in the early 2010s. And yet the division structure that Wisconsin has enjoyed has not given a free pass, but it's given you a discounted pass to a one-game opportunity to play for a conference championship. If that goes away, plus the arrival of USC and UCLA in terms of competition, then just settling for anything less than a stellar hire was going to force you into the middle class after you had been kind of enjoying close to the big boy table in a way that the program history was not really set up for over the long period of their Big Ten time.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like one of the better ways to put this is, like, as you were mentioning, Bud, this is like the clear statement to get to, 4th, 5th, whatever you want to pick at this point. But like, if you're an Iowa fan, a Minnesota fan, an Illinois fan, a Purdue fan, a Michigan State fan, if you're a fan of any of those schools, you're not unhappy with your current situation, but you're not happy to hear that Wisconsin's hiring Luke Fickell either, because it's like that job just became that team became a lot more difficult to beat going forward based on what he was able to do at Cincinnati. Because if you think about it, I mean, Wisconsin's always been a development program. They get some 4-star guys in there. Occasionally they get a 5-star guy, but they're not bringing in all these tremendously highly rated recruits. They're bringing them in for their system. They're developing them. Cincinnati, at its core, has been a very good recruiting group of 5 program, but it is still a development program at the same time. So Fickell has recruiting chops. He's got connections in Ohio, which is still a very fertile recruiting ground for the Big Ten. A lot of very good Big Ten players come from that state. And he's got the development. He sent 9 guys to the NFL. This is a very good thing for Wisconsin. Oh, and by the way, one of the 9 guys that he sent to the NFL was a quarterback. Wisconsin,
yeah,
you've got a coach that could find a quarterback and put him in an offense that is still physical and it can still play your style, but maybe a little bit more, balanced and dangerous.
It's interesting because basically you're getting a career DC who now has head coaching experience over a career DC who you think would be good at the job. Like, I'm sure Wisconsin did give Jim Leonhard real consideration for this job, but Luke Fickell, I mean, since he took over for Tuberville, who was a disaster at Cincinnati, he had that 4-8 year to start. Okay. Then they go 11-2, 11-3, 9-1, 13-1, 9-3. I don't always love his offenses, but I think it speaks to the level of talent and development and trait seeking that they get. Like this year, if you watch their offense, it's not fun to watch, but they have just explosive dudes on the outside who make up for, I think, terrible quarterback play. And I don't really know that I love their offensive staff there at Cincinnati, but the guys had to change coordinators before and has done so successfully. They recruit really well. He understands how to run a program. And I mean, I think that's the thing we underrate in coaching searches. We think about upside, but consistency also really matters here. And they have consistently been, I mean, like 1, 2, or 3 in the American constantly. And you could say they have some of the best resources in that league, and they do. But I mean, Wisconsin appears to be willing to spend, so they will have some of the better resources in the Big Ten now.
Yeah, like when they made the move on Christ and they went to Leonhard, like it was widely assumed, coach in waiting. I think they wanted, in an ideal world, I think they wanted the program to just finish really strong and for Jim Leonhard to take this job and be the guy going forward. But he didn't. Like, if you look at how they finished, like, it was a pretty, compared to how the season started with their schedule, getting Ohio State, and then Illinois, the loss. It's like you looked at the rest of the schedule: Northwestern, Michigan State, Purdue, Maryland, Iowa, Nebraska, Minnesota. Like, not the most difficult path. And the only wins were they beat Purdue, which is a good win. They beat Maryland, which is a decent win, but they struggled to beat Nebraska on the road last week, had to come back. They lose the rivalry game to Minnesota. It's like, the Badgers under Leonhard over the second half of the season really didn't look like a much different team than what they looked like under Chris. So I think, to Chris McIntosh's credit, instead of playing to what he wanted or maybe the ideal scenario or just kind of crossing his fingers hoping for the best, he said, I can't take that chance.
To those who are joining us right now, no, this is not official, but it is being widely reported, like
pretty official.
And do you know what? It's a state job. There is a Board of Regents meeting that is reported to be held for 4 p.m. Central Time. And
Rittenberg just said, by the way, did you see this, Chip?
No, I didn't.
He said a 1 p.m. meeting for Fickell to meet with his team at Cincinnati.
So it's happening. They haven't announced it yet, but it's happening.
It's happening. Yay. I mean, so on the other side, I'm not saying not coming up on the other side, but in a little bit, we'll get to the Cincinnati side of this. But for Jim Leonhard, do you think that there was a chance he could have won the job on the field? Because there were disappointing games that maybe could have gone the other way. There were close margins that maybe could have gone the other way. You mentioned the style of play didn't look all that different on either side of the ball. Do you think that there was an opportunity for Jim Leonhard to be able to get this done? Or do you think that sort of that motivation that you mentioned for Chris McIntosh to be able to get somebody who's proven might have always existed a little bit more than I know I thought?
I think there was a chance, but it was just a rough finish. Like you lost to Iowa and you were never really competitive in that game. You need to come back late to beat a bad Nebraska team. You lose at home to your rival Minnesota in the to finish the season, and I just don't feel like the way that things finished there was any reason to think and we talked about this on the show. Like, I had heard that they were going a different direction a couple, what was that, like 7-10 days ago?
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it at the time. It was like, because when they got bowl eligible, it was like, okay, maybe that's what the goal was. But clearly, like, this isn't. Luke Fickell came out of nowhere, but I don't think this is a process that just started. I think Wisconsin has been, in fact, I know Wisconsin has been pretty heavily involved in talking to coaches from outside of Madison for a while.
I do think there was some chance that Leonhard could have got the job, obviously. But I think it would have to be looking different on the field, which they didn't do enough of. But also, I don't know what his plan was that he presented internally and whether that moved the needle for Wisconsin's athletic director, right? Like, those are questions really only he can answer, and almost certainly won't answer now, given that they have hired somebody else. But my guess here is that Fickell's plan was better in the eyes of the AD, because that's who he made the hire for. However, what if UCF does not make that comeback last night after choking the game away against USF? Does Wisconsin wait another week here for Cincinnati to go play Tulane again in the American Championship? What if Cincinnati had won that ball game? Would Wisconsin be waiting until the New Year's Six game if Fickell wanted to do that? Kind of makes you question. I do think this comes down to, by the way, like why would you jump? Because some people in the chat are like, why would you take Wisconsin over Cincy? I mean, guys, this is sort of what we talk about with the Big Two. Yeah, it's a 3x number in terms of money being brought in addition to all the booster stuff, which I guarantee you Wisconsin has bigger boosters than Cincinnati does. So when you're talking about 3x the money you get to play with, it's really not comparable unless you're at one of these schools like a Clemson or something that's incredibly booster funded when we're talking about these non-Big Two leagues compared to the Big Two. And the new Big 12 is certainly not in the league with the Big 10.
Yeah, I mean, it's money. It's like, I understand if you're a Cincinnati fan, you're moving to a Power 5 conference, and that's awesome because you kind of need to, and it's a big deal for your program. But the Big 12 and the Big 10 are not the same. They're both Power 5 conferences, but when it comes to the television money and the resources that you have, it's just not the same thing. And then also, we've seen this with other programs. When you move to a new conference and you've kind of got a new footprint, you don't really know what the future is going to be. We've seen programs get derailed. Nebraska just hired Matt Rule, its third coach since joining the Big 10, because the program has been derailed moving from the Big 12 to the Big 10. It's kind of lost its identity. You don't know at Cincinnati, a Midwestern school in Ohio, going to the Big 12, which is a conference that is mostly not, it's the Plains, but it's further west, and it's Texas and Oklahoma. Like, you don't know how you're going to fit in there. You don't know how recruiting is going to work. If you're Luke Fickell, you know everything you've been doing recruiting wise at Cincinnati, you can still do at Wisconsin in the Big Ten. You don't know if you'll be able to have that same kind of situation with Cincinnati in the Big 12. So your program, your blueprint, you know it's going to work. So you're going to have more money, more resources, and you already have your blueprint for success.
How much do you think the Cincinnati SMU game impacted his decision here? Because like they almost lost SMU, and you look at SMU playing TCU this year, and TCU just smacked him, right? I mean, it kind of makes you wonder, like, if you're Cincinnati, I think it's fairly clear that Prater is not ready to play at a high level in the American. He's certainly not going to be ready to play at a high level, most likely, unless he takes a huge jump next year in the Big 12. I've said this often. You take the check, you take the losses that come with it, right? Ask Maryland about that. And like Coca's producing today, ask West Virginia. Would West Virginia rather be in the American still? No, because like that's basically like it's not a good league anymore if you're trying to play at the highest level. But the step up in competition, like Fickell's star, I think would always burn kind of bright because he did take Cincy to the playoff at a G5 school, the only coach to have done so. But it's not crazy to think Cincy goes into the Big 12 and it's all of a sudden like a 7-5 type team. You know, like, do you really think that they're going to be 7-2 in the league consistently? I don't, at least not to start.
Do you think that the fact that well, actually, let's get to that. Coming up on the other side, where Cincinnati is going to be moving forward, and another hire that was made official here on Sunday morning. Kenny Dillingham, 32 years old, youngest head coach at the Power 5 level. He's taken over at his alma mater, Arizona State. So we'll talk Cincinnati, Arizona State, more Coaching Carousel buzz next.
Whoa. Okay, Dad, let's get that rating up.
The game has some sort of power overlay.
He went from rickety old man to some kind of superhero overnight.
Some questionable dance moves.
What are you doing?
I'm just pressing some buttons.
What is the secret?
Playing a lot of Madden.
Fantasy Football original movie now streaming.
I got my butt back.
What?
On Paramount Plus.
So what does Cincinnati do here? We'll get to Jim Leonhard in a little bit. That's also all of a sudden, is he, I don't know, that's a pretty much coveted defensive coordinator, or maybe he does want to be a head coach. What does Cincinnati do with Fickell on the way out?
Urban Meyer.
Get out of town. Let's go.
I mean, he gets to stay in Ohio. His son is already on Cincinnati's staff.
I want to just completely laugh it off, but
oh no.
I can't.
Oh,
let's do it. Let's get Cincinnati fans hopes up.
It would be splashy.
Oh,
that would be incredible. I mean, would he do that though? Would he?
I mean,
like Ohio State could be open. We talked about it. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's Urban Meyer or bust. If Cincinnati doesn't hire Urban Meyer, it's a failure.
Urban in the Big 12. Urban recruiting the state of Texas, which he did.
Mm-hmm.
Urban going to play in Orlando in road games against Big 12 foe UCF.
That would be, I don't think that's going to happen, but it is crazy that I can't completely rule it out. I don't know if not Urban. I mean, what is Cincinnati? It's an attractive gig. It's going to be moving to the Power 5.
I got one for you. What apparel does Cincy wear?
Is it Under
Armour?
Deion
Sanders. It's a Power 5 job. I think it's a better job than Colorado until I'm proven otherwise with Colorado's spending and transfer stuff. I could see Deion doing well at Cincinnati.
I agree.
By the way, Cincinnati is kind of the South to me. I don't know how you guys feel about this. Tom, you're a Midwesterner,
Kentucky.
but yeah, it's basically like, so you can recruit the South from Cincinnati if you need to.
I mean, I saw some commenters mention Brian Hartline because like the Ohio State assistant clearly worked out for them. But I just wonder, like, money wise, is like, I mean, how much is Cincinnati going to pay him? Can Ohio State kind of compete because he is pretty important to what the Buckeyes do?
Fickell was making $5 million a year. I mean, like, there's no way that Ohio
can pay
State
him that much.
can
Yeah,
match
but
that.
I'm just, if you're Hartline though, do you want to leave Ohio State for that? If he wants to be a head coach, I think that's a very good option to consider for sure, because we know his recruiting chops and we've seen what he's been able to do with developing these receivers. Because we talk about it, like, he gets plenty of talented players and that's great, but we've seen a whole lot of talented receivers go to places and not really amount to anything. The hit rate that he has on these guys is exceptionally high. So I feel like that's a good sign, both for his recruiting acumen and his coaching skill.
By the way, Cincinnati is not getting much buyout money from this. Have you seen this?
No.
Fickell, this is per an Athletic article. Fickell's buyout, should he choose to leave for another job, begins at $3.5 million if he leaves before January 1st, 2023. Like, that is exceptionally cheap, and should have been a tell that like, clearly, like, Fickell was not going to stay at Cincinnati long term.
Tom Herman, like, we've got kind of like all the
that.
names of these other coaches that are not in coaching right now who could step in a moment's notice and be able to take over right away, try to start assembling the staff, try to do whatever they can to keep that early signing class together. Because we haven't seen, Matt Rule was one of them, but we haven't seen, a Tom Herman. We haven't seen a Kevin Sumlin. We haven't seen one of those other names really surface yet at one of those jobs.
What's Herman's relationships like with Texas high schools?
I think it's fine with a lot of them. Yeah,
I was going to say, because that could be nice just to have. He's obviously, from his time at Ohio State, he's familiar with Ohio. You get him to in the Big 12. He's familiar with Texas because of his time at Texas, and his name's been popping up at a lot of jobs. So it's clear that he wants to get back in the game. So that's somebody I think you should keep an eye on to consider. Yes.
Also, what was the deal with Carmelo Anthony where, like, he was born in New York, but really raised in Baltimore? But when he went to the Knicks, it was like, oh, I'm coming home, because Tom Herman was born in Cincinnati, but moved to California at the age of 6. Mm-hmm. So he was really, like, raised in California, but then you could at least say, like, oh, it's so great to, come home to Cincinnati.
He's got that chili in his blood.
You can't ever get that chili out of your blood.
Or your shirt.
I feel I don't feel bad, but we're setting the bar at Urban Meyer and Deion Sanders. Watch them come out and be like, we're promoting internally.
might happen, but I mean, it's an attractive job.
Yeah, like that's a job that is clear it will pay. I mean, what's a better job, Cincinnati or Texas Tech? Cincinnati or West Virginia? Cincinnati or
Tommy
SMU?
Tuberville would definitely say Cincinnati over Texas.
Right.
Tech.
I mean, like, literally, yeah. So I think it's a quality job.
I would rather have Cincinnati than Colorado right now.
Yes, for sure. Especially with the uncertainty surrounding the Pac-12.
I would rather have Cincinnati than Stanford. I would rather have, I mean, it's a good job.
Can they place Bill O'Brien here?
No. If I'm a Cincinnati fan, I'm so mad if Bill O'Brien gets rehomed.
He's got to get rehomed somewhere.
FAU. There you go. Bang.
Would you take Butch Jones back?
I don't know how Cincinnati fans felt about that. I don't know.
Okay, because like they've been absolutely terrible, but also Arkansas State seems like it's kind of a mess.
Also, the Butch Jones experience was so short.
Yeah. Would you?
He came in off Brian Kelly's coattails.
Mm-hmm.
It was like splash, splash, Tennessee. I don't think.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't think he left enough of an impact. Brian Kelly back to Cincinnati.
They're going to run him out of Baton Rouge after losing to A&M.
Latest conspiracy that I loved was LSU laid down for Texas A&M to keep Jimbo around.
Yeah, LSU sacrificed its playoff potential to help Jimbo playing the long game.
All right, so you mentioned late into the night after. Did you cash? Yeah, Bud cashed his BYU ticket.
Yes.
Late into the night after the defeat, Stanford coach David Shaw resigned. It's like about 3 a.m., 4 a.m. on the East Coast. David Shaw resigns as head coach. He's one of the most successful coaches in Stanford football history, but this season and really a lot of everything recently has not gone well. That job is not coveted.
Run the option.
I mean, I think that job will be coveted because that job pays well. David Shaw was making a ton of money, right?
Wasn't that your argument why he would never quit?
I just
I
thought
remember getting a lot of pushback on here when I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know, man.
I didn't think they would fire him. I guess with the quit thing, it was like, all right, like if you're really, really tired of it or something, which
No, it's the noble thing to do. It allows you to like stay good with the alumni and be able to still come back because it's like you fell on the grenade for the program. Be like, the message just isn't getting received like it used to.
Do we think this is a quit though? Like not a firing?
It'll depend on how much he gets paid from this point out.
Also, like, did the broadcast know? Because they kept cutting to him a ton during the broadcast. He was kind of like looking up longingly at the scoreboard, and in hindsight, I'm like, man, I guess he was just kind of taking it all in what he knew was going to be his last game, assuming it was a quit. Okay, so with Stanford as a program, right? They do have money for athletics, quite a bit of it. There are a lot of issues there, though, that I don't know. Like, should Stanford continue to play football? Like, do they want to play football in the Pac-12? I don't know. Like, I will give credit to Pat Forty here. About a year ago on a podcast, he was like, I don't know how long Stanford's going to play football, right? And his daughter swam for Stanford on the Olympic team. They have a lot of problems there that are just institutional problems, not like criminal stuff. I'm talking about
problems for big time college football system.
Yes,
we are the Cover 3 podcast.
Obstacles.
Yeah.
Yeah, not problems. Obstacles that make it almost impossible to win now, because now at almost every institution in the country, if you whiff on a high school kid, you can fix your whiff by going to the portal. At Stanford, you really can't. They had a good graphic on the TV last night showing all of the transfer numbers per the Pac-12 teams, and I don't even think the Pac-12 teams necessarily went all that nuts with taking transfers. Some did, but not everyone. Stanford had one transfer on the roster, and I'm pretty sure it's a kid who wanted to go to Stanford for school anyway, and then also just happened to be really good at, was it Oklahoma State or Arizona State? I'm trying to think. The Fields kid, who's one of their best players on defense. Additionally, Stanford routinely loses players to the transfer portal who have eligibility left because Stanford's grad schools do not play ball with the football program in terms of taking kids in. So if you graduate at Stanford with your undergrad degree, most schools will find some kind of master's program for you to get in, basket weaving or whatever, so that you can continue to play football. The problem here is Stanford doesn't. So you routinely see some of Stanford's better players. I can't say they never play ball. Like maybe they do for a really, really special kid, but for a lot of these players who are good players, who are valued elsewhere, they have to transfer out because they're not getting in to grad school at Stanford. It's also a program that has been rocked, and they've made some improvements on this, but not enough, by the early signing period. David Shaw, if you want to go back 6 or 7 years ago now to like 2015, 2016, when I think we were all, writing at the time more. Shaw, like when we wrote articles on what coaches said about the early signing period proposal, who was the guy who was the most vocal in opposition? It was always David Shaw, because he knew Stanford would be cooked if they passed this thing, because they don't offer admission to kids early enough. Oftentimes the actual stamp of, hey, you're in, doesn't come until after the early signing period. And kids are just simply not willing to wait for that. Now they've made some improvements. They're playing ball a little bit more there. It's also a thing where like assistant pay, I think is something you're gonna have to look at. And then the cost of housing as well in the Bay Area is exorbitant. So you may have good coordinators and good head coach, but how much do you have to pay a guy? We talked about this with Lincoln Riley, right? Would USC step up and pay your video guy or your analyst you want to bring in? Can you pay him 140 as opposed to 60? Because I mean, like a decent house in the Bay Area is like well over $1 million, right? So there's a lot of issues there.
Does Stanford own homes though in the area that they
do own some? Yeah.
I could think of a coach who's had a lot of success running a program that has very strict eligibility requirements and cannot accept transfers. His name is Jeff Monken. Run the damn triple, Stanford. Do it. Run the smart man's offense.
What about Willie Fritz?
Hire Willie Fritz.
It's a more modern triple. I mean, if you wanted to. Yeah, I think the triple could work there. But we also need to redefine work. Is work like make a bowl?
Yeah.
I mean, I think unless they in the transfer portal era. Also, I don't think Stanford does a whole lot with the NIL. At least not what I've been told. Maybe they step it up there because they have so many rich alumni, but they don't really seem inclined to do that so far, I guess.
I mean, not unless you have a patent.
You think Chris Peterson would jump back into the Pac-12?
I won't be surprised if Chris Peterson returns to coaching. I just don't know if Stanford's where he's going to want to do it.
Seems like a good fit for the guy who kind of just wants to be a teacher.
I could see that.
Bronco?
He didn't love all the recruiting stuff. Bronco could be interesting. Yeah. I kind of feel like, I don't know. I don't want to say Bronco could do better, but maybe he could in terms of the ability to win. That could be interesting. I bet you they'll get a name that we're like, that's a pretty good hire. And then ultimately the success of the hire will largely depend on how much the school is willing. Yeah, exactly. Would Nick Saban win at Stanford as it is currently comprised?
What about Derek Mason or Willie Taggart, two former Stanford assistants who are familiar with, what it takes there and have head coaching experience?
All right. Do ticket sales matter in this? Because
no, they don't sell tickets as it is.
Right. Okay. So maybe you can hire a defensive guy like Derek Mason. But he also did not do very well at another academic spot like Vanderbilt.
No, but Stanford's not in the SEC either.
This is fair.
Staying in the Pac-12, Kenny Dillingham officially named the head coach at Arizona State, the Scottsdale native who came up through the Arizona high school coaching ranks and was even a former Arizona State staffer. He linked up with Mike Norvell, followed Norvell to Memphis and also to Florida State, 1 year with Gus Malzahn in between. And Dillingham is now tasked with what is going to be both A, clean up and rebuild, and then B, trying to guide Arizona State to a new ceiling in a new Pac-12 that does not have USC and UCLA. And when we start to look at the future Pac-12, and as we have discussed, Arizona State's ceiling based on, Bud always mentions the changing demographics, the way that people have been moving out of California into Arizona. What do you make of Dillingham's chances to be able to arrive at his alma mater and sort of deliver on all of the romantic hopes that seem to be circling this hire?
I think it's possible that he can absolutely be a home run there. It's also possible he could bomb. Of all the hires, and granted, there are no certainties in coaching searches and coaching hiring, right? But I do think that this one has the widest error bars. I know Kenny, I think he could absolutely kill it there. It also is going to depend on what happens with the administration. I'd like to read you something here from our Arizona State 24/7 sports site, Chris Cartman, who does a tremendous job and has covered the search, really well. This is from November 18th. From what I've heard, ASU did not self-impose a bowl ban this year and could have done so even after Herm Edwards left. So this season would have qualified as a self-imposed bowl ban, even though ASU didn't even make a bowl. And everyone knew weeks ago ASU wasn't headed for a decent bowl and probably wouldn't make any bowl. This was entirely Ray Anderson's decision to make. As ever, Ray Anderson is the AD, by the way, who I cannot believe is still there. That's that ASU's administration is kind of a clown show, in my opinion. They're not a well-run ship. As I've reported throughout the year, ASU officials believe the program will be hit with a flurry of level 1 infractions. The NCAA penalty matrix for that includes a 1 to 2 year competitive postseason ban unless it is mitigated level 1, which is not expected to be due to violations being so numerous with so many recruits and involving the head coach, who was kept on the job for 15 months after the investigation began. And the penalty matrix is supposed to be for even when the violations occurred, not based on new rules or changes or interpretations, meaning it's unlikely to be mitigated. Okay, continuing. Also, even though ASU did self-impose some recruiting restrictions since late last year, including not sending Edwards or Pierce, that's the assistant coach Pierce, out at all, and not sending as many coaches out for contact and evaluation periods, ASU did not self-impose as many recruiting restrictions as it could have done on contact visits, scholarship production, evaluations, etc. And he basically just goes on, in his opinion.
So they messing up.
It does make me wonder, how many people wanted this job, given who is still in power with this job, what might be coming for this job. But I also recall us having this conversation about Tennessee, and it worked out really well for Tennessee, and not a lot of people wanted the Tennessee job. And I was of the opinion that Danny White at Tennessee was hiring Josh Heupel to, at the very minimum, score a lot of points and sell some tickets until they could, weather the sanctions. And they damn near made the playoff this year if they hadn't got, boat raced by South Carolina. So what I know about Kenny Dillingham, young dude, hard worker, right? Like, he's pretty relentless. He is somebody who's not afraid to go out and take big swings at big time recruits. I saw that Arizona State today got a $1 million NIL match thing, which is a start. Like, that's not going to land you a 5-star unless you spend it all on one kid in 1 year. I mean, to get a 5-star nowadays, you need to be thinking, probably $3 million over 4 years type thing for the NIL market. But I think he will immediately give it a really good effort in recruiting against Jed Fish at Arizona. And I think that they will run a fun, exciting offense and be extremely active in the transfer portal. If you guys don't know Kenny, he was a offensive coordinator / coach for Mike Norvell with stops at Arizona State, Memphis, and then Florida State, where he was the OC last year before taking over for Dan Lanning. And they ran a really nice offense this year with a lot of transfers at Oregon. So I'm excited to see what he can do. I'm also just heavily doubtful that Arizona State's administration has his act together.
It's an exciting hire in that, like you said, there's a pretty high ceiling. It's just there's also a low floor. But at the same time, like, if you're an Arizona State fan, and I don't mean this is disrespectful, even though it's going to sound disrespectful. Sorry to Danny's friend Herm Edwards. You went from hiring an old man who was bringing a boring ass offense to play 17 to 13 games to hiring a young coach with an exciting offense who loves the hell out of the school, who was crying during the press conference. Like, you might not win a bunch of games right away. You might go through some rough times, but at least you've got a coach who's interested in fixing things. And that's instead of a coach who's maybe, taking a retirement gig.
Well, and I mean, think about all of the hires that we've seen. Dennis Erickson, Herm Edwards. I mean, even Dirk Cutter and Todd Graham were in their 40s, almost to 50 years old at the time they took the job. I mean, this has been like, I am not super familiar with the Scottsdale, Phoenix, Tempe area. So I don't want to paint with the broad brush, but any jokes that you have about like retirement and golf and good weather and just like, cashing checks out there, like, the head coaching hires were more in line with that. This is youthful. This is energetic. This is hitting the recruiting trail. This is tapping into a surging talent base of Arizona high school football and trying to make sure that the Sun Devils own it. This is trying to make sure that Arizona State, when you look geographically at the new Pac-12 with USC and UCLA out, like, Oregon and Washington are way up there. There is no reason why you can't absolutely own sort of the southern footprint of the Pac-12. It might take some time, might be some rough times, but I like the hire. Tom, is it a bit that you're doing on Twitter when you say I have no idea if it will work, but I like the hire?
It's a bit, but it's also 100% true.
No, I like it. I like it. Okay. I've seen it enough times that I wanted to see if there was some consistency to it.
Mm-hmm.
Can we add one to the Cincinnati thing? Sorry if Coca needs to splice this. What about Dan Mullen? He has obviously coached with Urban Meyer. I feel like he knows the area pretty well.
Northeast guy.
But we just said Cincinnati is Kentucky.
It is, but I'm just saying he's got Mississippi State roots too. So he's the perfect blend of everything that you need.
All right. Jake Spavital out at Texas State. That news coming while we were sitting there with you. So the open jobs right now are Auburn, Colorado, FAU, Georgia Tech, USF, Stanford, UAB, Cincinnati, and Texas State.
I don't know what you guys have planned today, but can I just pose you a question?
Yeah.
Why hasn't Hugh Freeze been announced yet?
Can I speculate on this?
Yes. I would love it if you did.
I think it's because of the pushback that they got for the DMs that he sent to that girl.
Ooh.
Who could have seen pushback coming on Hugh Freeze?
By the way, Fickell has, according to The Athletic, Fickell just told the team he's taking the job. So
also, Barry Alvarez gave quotes that, like, My guess is he gave him more than like a minute ago. So one of the Wisconsin papers has been sitting on it, said it's a home run hire.
How about it?
It's happening.
It's happening. So if you're just joining us, yes, we got on here. Luke Fickell to Wisconsin, a very good hire for the Wisconsin Badgers. Luke Fickell leaves Cincinnati after turning down that we know at least one Big Ten opportunity. And now he will be joining the conference where he played as an Ohio State Buckeye, where he spent extensive time as an Ohio State staffer and one-time interim coach. And now he will become a Big Ten rival of the Ohio State Buckeyes as the Wisconsin Badgers head coach. Oh, one last thing before we get out of here. Tom, again, great idea. Where's Jim Leonhard going?
I don't know. He's probably going to be in demand for defensive coordinator jobs because he didn't do what they wanted to as a head coach, but it's hard to argue that Wisconsin's defenses haven't been great under him. Maybe he sticks in Madison. I don't know if Luke Fickell their defenses aren't exactly the same. Luke Fickell's probably going to want to bring in somebody on his own, but there's going to be plenty of schools interested. I was just thinking this is 100% pure speculation on my part. Illinois defensive coordinator Ryan Walters is still connected to the Colorado job. Who was Jim Leonhard's defensive coordinator his senior year at Wisconsin? Brett Bielema. Just something to keep in mind.
What about the Green Bay defensive coordinator job if that comes open?
That he turned it down to stay at Wisconsin because he thought he was going to get that job. And
there will be some places out there that need D coordinators though this fall.
Yeah. His market will be robust.
Jim Leonhard will be okay. I'm sure he's disappointed, but who knows? Maybe when Ohio State runs Ryan Day out of town and Luke Fickell leaves Wisconsin for Ohio State, maybe Wisconsin will come calling again for Jim Leonhard.
Maybe that's why Brian Hartline won't take the Cincinnati job.
By the way, but I'm not going to stop thinking about Urban Meyer at Cincinnati. I'm gonna think about that way too much. And with that, we leave you. You can follow him on Twitter at Tom Fernelli. You can follow him at Bud Elliott 3. You can follow me at Chip_Patterson. Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you.